So, the way I structured the lecture to talk about the actual performances is starting off, of course, with the spirit of the 60s and the 70s, or what I call the historic performances. Now, this doesn't mean that some performance artists aren't still performing today, because a lot of them are. You can look at Yoko Ono, for instance, Marina Abramovich. So sometimes I'll put them into different categories, but I'm sure you'll get the flow of the lecture as we go along. But again, I like to start out kind of talking about more the performance artists who were operating historically, as we might say, in the 60s, 70s, and then finishing off by looking at more contemporary performers, right? So this is the structure that I use. The first performance artist I love to look at is Yves Klein. And his pieces, to me, are kind of a mashup between like the ideas of Pollock, this idea of like abstract expressionism and the brushstroke, the lack of subject in painting, and like how do you transfer that to like a person, a performance. So I always think of Klein as kind of taking Pollock's ideas and perhaps figuring out how to make them into a performance piece, and you'll notice that what he does is he uses women as paintbrushes. So he has these naked women, right? And they're coating themselves in paint and then doing body prints, and then they would drag themselves across the floor and such. And again, that's another thing I see be very similar to Pollock is the dragging, kind of idea. He always used a very specific blue paint that they actually started calling Klein blue because that's the blue that he always used. And the French title you'll see here translates roughly to bodies in a blue age. So this idea of bodies in a blue age, right? This is some example of the body prints that would be made. In the performance, you'll notice that there was an audience, right, of people. And so again, this idea of inviting people into this space to watch the spectacle, and then he had a string orchestra that was playing one note over and over and over again to create this sort of again odd sort of experience that you're submerged within. So I always think of performance as kind of like dragging the audience into this and them not really knowing what they're going to see. And in this case, it's these naked women, kind of pressing their body onto canvases, dragging their bodies around this paint. For the 60s, this would have been like, what the heck are we seeing, right? It would have been so odd and so different and so new. Sort of, again, revamping the idea of what art could be. Yeah, it's a painting, but it's a painting with your body, right? So it brings your body into the idea of the art making. Another important historic movement that I already mentioned briefly was the Fluxus movement, and both Yoko Ono and Nam June Paik were part of this movement. Now, Paik, you'll see later when we talk about video art. He actually becomes very well known for his video art pieces. So he's in Fluxus as a performance artist for a bit at the beginning of the 60s, and then he really sort of moves into making art with TVs, other digital components, right, as that technology advances. So he's more known as a video artist. So we'll see him again. And here you're seeing two of Pack's pieces, right? Zen for Head, and then a performance he did with the cellist Charlotte Mormon. Pack and Yoko Ono, of course, are going to come from Asian contexts where Buddhism was a part of their upbringing. So the idea of Zen Buddhism, right, translating into this Zen for head idea. But you'll note what he did. He stuck his head in a bucket of paint and then just drug it right down a piece of paper. Now, this relates a lot, of course, to Japanese and Korean, Asian painting in general, where you see calligraphy, right, used, brushwork used, this habuku style, as we call it in Japanese, brushwork used. It's very loose, it's very fluid. So I think he was, sort of kind of giving a historical shout out, right, to his Asian roots. But it also can be viewed as a piece that's all about the momentary, because he puts his head in the paint and then he drags it down the piece of paper. It's this momentary action that, of course, we capture here in this photograph. But again, that's all we can look at now, right? We're looking at this historic old document. He's saying that, again, this happened in the moment. Now the moment is gone. So I think performance, teaches us about how, sort of random and momentary a lot of our life is, and I think we try to document it, we try to hold on to it, but the moments are slippery, right? And again, if you think about collecting this, there's no real way to collect it. I mean, I guess you could hang up the piece of paper with the paint on it, but that's not really Pack's point. The performance of Charlotte Mormon, he's being used like a human cello, and she was a trained cellist, so she played the cello, as her profession. And he talked about how this idea of playing people or playing ourselves, right, as something to consider, right, within the performance. He's taking something very classical, very established, this idea of playing a musical instrument and sort of again making us rethink what that is. Yoko Ono is probably one of the most famous of the Fluxus group. And a lot of people don't know she's an artist. A lot of people just know her from her relationship with John Lennon, her music, right? Which, if you know her music is interesting indeed. Um, but, for us art historians, we're like, primarily she's an artist, right? She's an art maker. And she's more of a conceptual performance based artist, right? So a lot of her pieces are about this sense of energy or direction or action or, confrontation. This is one of the first performances that she did, and it's probably the most well known and cited, which is her work Cut Piece. And in Cut Piece, she basically came out and kneeled down on the stage in front of her audience. She was sort of sitting in this almost like Buddhist meditation pose. And then an announcer came out next to her, set down a pair of scissors, and said, "Yoko Ono invites you to cut off her clothes," and then left the stage. So, what is this performance all about? She said, "On the surface, it looks like, what it looks like, come cut off my clothes. Yoko Ono invites you to cut off her clothes." So nicely put, right? An invitation. But she said the piece wasn't really about me. The piece was really about the audience. Because she said, think about it. If someone told you, "Come cut off my clothes," what's your reaction? Most people are not going to jump right up and go at it. They're just not. We're going to look at our neighbor, right? So when I'm talking about this in the classroom, it's a lot easier to make this point. We would look at our neighbor, right? We might start to whisper to them, like, "Is this serious?" Right? Some people deflect when they're uncomfortable, so they might start looking around in their bag, right, or looking at their phone, or trying to avoid eye contact, trying to avoid the directive. And then eventually, what happens? One person breaks the seal. I would say there's at least always one leader in every group who's like, "I'm done with this. I don't want to sit here anymore. I'm going to go start this ball rolling." And so she said the piece was about how people react in groups, what people choose to do. She said, "We usually start out pretty unsure. We're looking to others for confirmation. We're looking to others for safety." She's like, "But then there's usually that person who's the leader who breaks out." She's like, "They come down and they cut," which is what happened. One person came down to cut. Then you can imagine what happened next. Right? Now the door's open. So what do people do? They get bolder. They get bolder. Now everybody wants to do it, right? The cuts might start getting more aggressive. They might get more, off the rails. And she said that's human nature. Human nature is to hang back until someone says it's okay. And then we become almost like a mob mentality. It can run to the other end, which is complete full on, violence, right? She said it never left my mind that these were scissors and I could have been hurt. I could have been injured. I had to have faith in what I was doing and I had to have poise. I had to see it through. And she had a time limit on it. So the announcer knew the time limit and was told to wait until the time limit and then stop people. But she said, as this thing started to roll and snowball, she said, the uncomfortability, of course, became more and more present. And the sense of danger and violence became more and more present to her. So she said, the piece isn't about me at all. The piece was about human nature. And she's redone this piece numerous times, but I'd argue, like, can you really redo a piece like this? Because if you know your art history, you know what she intends from you. So can you do it in a way that isn't like repeating a joke? Like, the punchline. I'd argue performance art is a one shot only medium, right? It is something where you do it, people are exposed to it, and then it's done. I don't think you really can redo this in a viable way because, again, people understand what they're in for the second time around. But again, it speaks to the history of these objects that she kind of, this idea of reviving it and people understanding what it is also very intriguing. Um, a lot of her work is about like people performing people performing and her looking at that. She started doing these pieces early in her career called Sky Machines, where literally it was like a little vending machine that was on the side of the road and you'd put like a quarter in and you'd pull a knob and a little picture of the sky would come out. So she was like, "I'm making people perform, I'm making people do something, interact with something." She said, "But I'm also telling them they can't own anything." You can't own the sky. You can't own that. It's intangible. But, if you think about today in a lot of more crowded metropolises, especially Asian cultures where there's much less land, like Singapore, Japan, island nations, and she's Japanese, so this is her background. They're actually selling air rights now for how high you can build a building. So we might say, yeah, you can't own the air, you can't own the sky, but it's being commodified today. But she's trying to make people perform. Wish trees are a practice that are done at Zen Buddhist temples. So often there's a tree outside the temple, and people write their wishes on it and then attach them to the trees. So she's done a lot of these wish trees, um, because she's thinking about, like, again, the idea of energy. How do we put our energy out into the universe? I saw her retrospective at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, the SF MoMA, back around, I think it was like 2003, 2002. And a lot of her pieces were about energy. She had a piece where there was a stack of rocks in a circle on one side of the room. You're supposed to take one of the rocks and think about all the negative things in your life, the things that you felt were holding you back, right? Think about those things as you held the rock and you walked across the room to another pile of rocks in another circle, and you're supposed to release that energy with the rock into that circle. So the piece was about your energy as a human, right? How are you performing that energy? So she thinks a lot about this. This is another famous piece she did, called Play It by Trust, where it's a chess set, but all the pieces are white. If you know Ono's background, she was a big peace advocate during the Vietnam War era, along with John Lennon, and still to this day is very anti-war, very pro-peace. And she talks about this idea of like winning and losing and combativeness and how that's a certain energy. She says, well, what if we take that energy away? What if you take away who wins, who loses? Why is it important to us to be on top? Not to see our society just be whole, be everyone be productive. Why is it so important to have more money than your neighbor, right? Or to get better grades than your friend? Where does this competitiveness come from? And how can we think about how to squash that? So you'll notice a lot of her works are about this performative energy. They're very conceptual in how they're devised, right? And how they're put forward. And I always think about how she met John Lennon. She was doing a show at the Indica Gallery, a very famous gallery in London, and John Lennon, a friend had told him, you got to go see this woman's show. Yoko Ono, you got to go see this show. It's amazing. So he goes to the Indica Gallery and he's looking at her stuff. And there's a piece where it's a ladder going up to the ceiling, and from the ceiling is hanging a magnifying glass. So he ascends the ladder and he puts the glass up to the ceiling, and written there is one word: yes. And he said, I have to meet this woman. And from there, that's where their love story began, because he saw the word yes. So she talks about in her works that she's always thinking about the positivity of living, the performance of living, but it can be a positive event, not a negative event. So I always think about that when I think about her work and the interactions with her work. This is Adrian Piper, and she's a great performance artist to look at. And you have to think about, she's doing these performances in the 60s, right? Before cell phone cameras and all these things where you could be unobtrusive. Like somebody had to follow her around to document these actions, right? So obviously the reaction might be a little bit different than the reactions you'd see today when you feel like you're not being maybe seen, right? Um, but she would walk around with these shirts that say wet paint on them and watch the avoidance of people. One of my favorite projects she did is her riding like the subway or riding a bus with this cloth stuffed in her mouth. And again, I think the woman in the photograph kind of says it all. I think when we're confronted with something abnormal, I describe it as we diligently ignore it. It's a diligent ignoring, right? Where we are like, no, I will not look at this. I will not see it. If I see it, if I make eye contact, then the person's going to interact with me. No, 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 no. So I enjoy watching like her do these very aberrant things, these very strange things, and then the diligent ignorance of the people around her, like, nope, not going to have it, right? Piper had went to Columbia University, and Columbia, if you know Columbia, it is basically right on the edge in New York of sort of the Upper West Side, right, and Harlem. So this idea of, kind of this conflict between what's considered kind of a ritzy neighborhood and then a very heavily African American neighborhood that sometimes lives in poverty. So right on this edge, right? And Piper was actually mixed race. So she was, partially white, partially black. And she said, I was light skinned though, so I could, as they would say, pass. Passing is something to look into if you're interested in African American history of representation, where the lighter skinned you were, often you could pass as white. And the history behind that is very interesting to look into because again, a lot of people tried to pass, especially during the age of slavery and then emancipation after that because it was more convenient and comfortable for them to not be viewed as black, right? So she talks about the idea of passing culturally for her, and she said, I wanted to think about, most people, they always thought I was white. What if I tried to appear as black as possible? So she did a project while she was at Columbia where she took on what she called this sort of pimp personality. This is the 60s and 70s, so you can go back and look at that time and the idea of pimps, in New York, men that ran, women and, drugs and such. And she said, I wanted to take on this cultural stereotype of like the blackest thing I could think of and something that was considered very dangerous. And she said, I would follow people around and watch them like cross the street to get away from me. She then literally actually started doing physical engagement with people where she would like fake mug them, and she said, I was actually this very diminutive, small woman. She's like, but when I put on my alter ego, she's like, I embodied everything they hated and feared, right? And she was like, it was all costuming. It was not really who I was. And so she said, performance is about like how do we navigate certain spaces and identities. So I think she actually gets into identity art here. Later, we're going to talk about identity art, that came out of the 60s and 70s and 80s, and I think that she is playing with identity art in her performances, where she's like, how do certain identities, how does wearing a certain piece of clothing, right, or walking a certain way, make you think differently of me? And I think that's something important to consider, even in our contemporary age. This is Chris Burden, who we saw before doing the shoot piece, and I had mentioned that a lot of his work was about danger, unpredictability. He did a lot of pieces where it was about using his own body in a dangerous way. This is his piece, Through the Night Softly, where he's in his underwear dragging himself through broken glass. Many art historians feel that the title refers to Kristallnacht, the night of glass, right, during World War II, where Jewish neighborhoods were attacked, right, and windows were broken and people were killed and taken off to concentration camps. So that he might be being a little bit symbolic and political with this piece, but he's talking, I think, mainly in his works about this idea of pushing the body to unrealistic expectations, pushing the body to places like that were about endurance. This is Transfixed, where he had himself nailed like he was being crucified to a VW bug. So he has nails through his hands, right, attaching him to the bug. Um, so his work, I think, it's the kind of performance art that said push your body to these places that are might be, sort of the pinnacle of pain. There's another artist you can look at, Gina Payne. She does a lot of this too in her works, where she would like cut herself, scar herself. So again, I think this is a whole sort of historic camp, of performance that says, what if you put your body in peril, right? What if you put your body in danger? And we might not look at this as being very ethical, but I think that, he's saying I'm doing this to myself. So yeah, I'm making you think about how fragile your body really is. What is this little membrane you live inside and how perishable is it?